Hey everybody, Todd here. Welcome back to Game Dev Breakdown, and this show requires just a momentary explanation. So the guest tonight is Matt Bradley-Tschirgi. He's a writer, developer, podcaster, super interesting guy, very nice guy. When we recorded this in Season 2, we did not have a published date for his book yet. We know now that the book is coming out September 27th, 2019 from Moon Books. The book is called The Films of Uwe Boll, Volume 1, The Video Game Movies, which is a very cool project, and I'll let him tell you about it. So here's my chat with Matt.
Good evening, fans. Tim Kitzrow here, the voice of NBA Jam, and you're listening to the Game Dev Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by CodeWritePlay.com. Whoa, boom shakalaka.
My mom gave birth in 1985. I was bluer than a Pac-Man ghost, barely alive. In the Cold War, my only blanket was Tetris. I played Rampart with Reagan, rampaged the world for breakfast. The laundromat was my sanctuary.
I think we got it. I think we're good.
Okay.
Matt Bradley-Tschirgi. How close is that?
You're exactly right. I'm shocked.
Oh my goodness. I'm not going to pretend I didn't look it up in video form. But
Oh, that's fine.
but that's what I do. Are you comfortable? You look a little cramped.
It's just the way I have the setup. I need to really get, I don't know, like a plastic cube or something to balance my microphone on.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But
I've had some uncomfortable setups in the past, and, well, really, it's not that much better that I've wedged this huge microphone stand in my in between me and my desk. But that's okay.
yeah, I mean, this is probably more detailed than you want to know, but that's what a podcast is for, right? So I used to have a condenser microphone. And
Sure.
then the past few years, we've moved in with our in-laws to save money, and they're raising their grandchild who was 6.5. And that condenser mic quickly proved to be a bad idea. Picks up noise from little kids running around and stuff and traffic. So I got this dynamic mic, and it cuts out the background noise a lot more.
What is it about kids? I have a son who is 4. What is it about kids that are drawn to these expensive microphones?
I don't know. I can't even think of. It's not like I don't think kids really listen to the radio or see
Right? They're
people
not like,
in cartoons. They don't have characters speaking into microphones.
it's a good point. They're not watching old movies about radio stations or anything. It's not, look at
Yeah.
me.
Right. Or they're not watching game shows where people speak into microphones or
Yeah,
what
Bob
have you.
Barker, yeah.
Yeah, or the Family Feud. So I don't know. It's kind of round at the end. That makes it look a little bit like a toy, but other than that, I don't really know.
Yeah.
A friend of ours has when their kid turned 4 for their birthday, they did sort of something that the parents and the kids could enjoy. So they have it's a local chain of karaoke things called Voice Box, where you rent a private room, and they had all sorts of little kid songs like the alphabet and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and stuff. And so the kids could do that, but then the adults could, drink beer and do whatever, Bon Jovi or whatever they do.
I love that, yeah.
In between, so it was real neat.
I love that idea. For our son's birthday, I bought him a personal PA system, which is just one speaker on a stand, but it also has a decent microphone that comes with it, and I bought that for him. He won't touch that, but the expensive one I bought shortly thereafter for the office, the last time he fiddled with it was just today. So, well, I guess we're off to a little bit of a soft start, just kind of roll into it, but for people who are unfamiliar with your work or are familiar only with parts of your work, I have had writers, podcasters, authors, game developers on the show. I think this is the first time I'm checking all those boxes at once. So, sort of run us through high level what you do.
Right. I have my fingers in a lot of different pies. I think perhaps what I'm best known for is I do a podcast called Sequelcast 2 and Friends that looks at movies in a franchise, one film at a time. I've been doing that with my co-host, William Thrasher, who's a friend of mine from college. And in some way or another, we've been doing that for 11 years now.
Man.
And so that's been fun. As far as indie game development, which a lot of what your podcast seems to be focused on, or game development in general, hence the name.
Sure.
I graduated from Savannah College Art Design with a degree in game design in 2005. So I was one of the first people through their program. And we can talk about that if you want.
Sure, yeah.
But I did an indie game called Frankenstein's Bastard Daughter. That's a free sort of text adventure you can play on gamesalad.com. And I'm currently working on a video game with the film director Uwe Boll, who did video game movies, and among others. And along those lines, I also am shortly coming out with an unofficial book looking at Uwe Boll's video game films called The Films of Uwe Boll, Volume 1, The Video Game Movies 2003 to 2014, coming out through Moon Books Publishing in a few months here.
Now, if the listener is paying attention at this point, they should be reeling, because that's a lot to process already.
It is. Yeah.
So I want to kind of start small and work our way up to the wild parts of what you just said. So,
Right.
First of all, as someone who has also worked on their own, I've actually written an entire text-based adventure game engine with like Bootstrap and like web design languages and stuff. And I never got to finish a complete game, but I do think it's got to be some kind of a rite of passage for any game developer who grew up when we grew up. You have to do a text adventure game of some kind, or a text-based game.
Yeah, I agree. I was born in 1982, and although I'm trying to think of those like adventure games. I didn't grow up with Zork and stuff like that, but I played them on re-releases in the 90s. My first adventure game was probably Sierra Online's Black Cauldron game, based off the Disney cartoon. It was designed by Al Lowe of Leisure Suit Larry fame, back when Sierra had the Disney license. So it's fairly old, but it's a game with a pretty minimalist design. You don't have to type in the text as much as some of the other games. And so with this one, the prototype for my text game, The Frankenstein Bastard Daughter, is I used actually a physical notebook, because I was inspired by the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I said, I'm going to write it out first draft by hand and only have the text take up one page of this tiny notebook at a time. And at the bottom, it'll say, do this or do that. And a big inspiration as I went to the local bookstore, got some used Choose Your Own Adventure games, and I noticed I had the recollection you're making choices all the time, but that's really not the case. You're reading 10 pages of text and then making a choice, and you found out your brother is a killer robot and you die. And then you go back to the beginning or try to remember where you left off. And so with this one, I tried to make the text short and punchy and have a lot of choices in there. And what I quickly ran into is I wanted to design it for iPhone. I started with iPhone 4. Developed it on my Mac Mini at the time. And then the iPhone 5 came out during development and had a different resolution, so I had to redo the graphics and so forth.
Yeah.
And then when I submitted it to Apple, I paid the $100 and change to submit to the App Store. And Apple said, we can't publish your game. It is too ugly. It is not aesthetically beautiful.
Oh, no.
And I said, this is a text adventure. And I pointed to other examples, and it just sort of fell apart. So I just decided to release it for free through GameSalad, and GameSalad is what I used to develop the game with. Have you heard of that before?
I'm not actually familiar with how they work.
Yeah. So on the Mac, it's free. I'm not sure if I think they might have a PC version. And you can develop the game with their sort of drag and drop engine. It's a bit like the old Maxis program Click and Play. Mm-hmm. If you've heard of that. Or Game Maker, something along those lines.
Sure.
And the idea is you can export stuff. It's good for making prototypes, I think. And the problem I ran into trying to make a game with it is the text it renders in the engine is really doesn't look that good. So each page of my text adventure, I rendered as image files through Photoshop.
Huh.
And then laid them as it was like the most complicated way possible. In retrospect, I would have been better using Twine, which is a pretty well-known indie sort of text adventure thing. But I didn't know any better. And, once I did it, the whole game's like 100 rooms long. I don't think it takes very long to beat. And I worked with a collaborator of mine who's done music for my podcast, Mark with the C. He's out in Orlando, Florida area. And I got him to compose a theme music for the game.
Nice.
And I actually used part of his music and have it in the sound design of the game. So if you make a choice where you don't die, it plays one clip of the music. And if you make a choice when you die, it plays a different clip of the music.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, it's interesting that you would actually use a game application of sorts to do this game, and that they would shut it down and say it doesn't really. I forgot there was a time when Apple was kind of doing more of this. They were going like, we're going to be picky and choosy on this one, and we don't entirely like this one's not for us. I don't think they really do that as much anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. This would have been like in 2012, 2013, something around that time.
Yeah, you kind of blew my mind by mentioning the Mac Mini, because that was exactly the way I first tried to get into professional game development. I went out and threw a Mac Mini on my credit card because you had to have a Mac device, and that was the cheapest one. So I went, okay, I'm going to do that, and then I paid the $100, and then nothing got done for a long time after that still. So they didn't let you go for it, and Game Salad was how you eventually got it done.
Right, and I think in retrospect, they sort of relented when I pushed back about them saying it was ugly, which, I mean, frankly, it is. It has an old-fashioned looking text that looks very blocky, like something on a TI-85 calculator, and has neon green text and orange text, kind of like the old computer monitors. And I made a mistake on GameSaddle developing the game. I picked the wrong option, and I couldn't undo it where... the other reason why Apple rejected it is when you turn your phone from the portrait mode to the widescreen mode, the game didn't adjust smartly with that. It didn't, redo the resolution. And so because of that, it would cut off the text if it was in widescreen mode. And Apple said that's absolutely unacceptable. Like you said, I think they were assholes at the time. And maybe they've loosened up on that because there's no lack of things on the Apple Store, legitimate or otherwise.
Well, yeah, and the two things that come to my mind when we talk about games like this are, one, games like Hack Run and Hacknet and all those, which are actually very fun games, but they're they're just straight up console, and you type in commands, and as they went on in the series, they got a little more creative. But the other one was A Dark Room, or The Dark Room, whichever one that was like straight up. It seemed like he sort of catered to Apple on that one, because he used the most very basic application framework for actual Apple apps, but it wasn't any of the game stuff. It was just like, press this button, you stoked the fire, and it just goes on. It complicates from there, but it was just very simplistic, and that won awards. And he recently ported that to the Switch, right? And this was a news story recently. I don't think a lot of people saw it, but in the Switch port, there's some kind of sort of soft root application where you can log in and like mod stuff and all that.
It lets you program something in Ruby or something. Is that right?
It's something like that, and Nintendo had to pull it, so that's their champion. So good luck with that.
Right.
So you pretty much got screwed a little bit by Apple. I completely think that's ridiculous. So if you'd done that a little bit later, I think it probably would have gone through and probably been popular.
I don't know about popular, but yeah, I think it sort of would have had a bigger audience. I did have, the one person I got feedback from the game from was a friend of mine I used to host a bar trivia with in Portland, Oregon, around the time I was doing the game. And I asked her, and she played it to the end, and I said, well, would you pay $1 for that? And she paused for a solid minute before saying, I guess. And it kind of, you look in the App Store, so many things are free with demos or whatever, that when comparatively, it can make $1 seem expensive.
Yeah.
But there you go.
When my first app came out, it was like a 5-screen educational game for like young kids, 5 and under, to learn letters and numbers, which I made for my son and decided to sort of flesh it out and put it on the market. And I had close friends who were asking me about it. Can I get this for my kid? And I said, yeah, I put it up. I'm asking for $1 for it. And, it took me like 8 months to do. And they were like, so it just teaches English? Yeah, it just teaches English. It's just the one language for this $1 app. I'm sorry. Take it up with Apple.
Yeah, you just reminded me, I think we mentioned, sort of offline when we were talking, I had taught some game design courses for Imagination Computer Camps in, I think like 2004 or something. And so I'm teaching kids, between grade school and high school about game design. We were using Game Maker as the primary software. I forget what version it was at the time. And I taught the kids to make a title screen to make it look a little more professional even though a lot of them didn't like that. And this one kid, he shows me his thing, and I go, "What? This isn't a title screen. It's Mario on some bricks, and it has the title in the background, but there's no click to start." And he says, "No, you just move Mario." And I did, and I went down a pit. And then it goes down, and that's when the real game starts. And I just was sort of blown away by that. And that, these kids are coming up with things so creatively. With what little you teach them, they can get so much more beyond that. I found that very inspiring.
Gonna let this one slide, kid.
Yeah,
I love this because you're actually one of the more formally trained guests I've had in at least recent history, having gone through actual game design training in a classroom setting and coming away with a degree to that effect. So
right. So it was 2005, so it was a while ago. A lot of what they had us use was the editor, for level editor for Unreal Tournament, 2003 or whatever, 2004 or whatever version it was at that time. Mm-hmm. And we used some 3D Studio Max and Maya and Photoshop, and I'm more of a writer or a designer, I think, than an artist, so I wasn't that good with that, but I did do much better using a hacked version of RPG Maker 2002, and also using Macromedia Flash. I was a little bit better with. So I mean, we got to try a lot of different sort of applications through the school program, and the Adobe Suite, I think, like I mentioned. So it was very interesting to see what people would come out with, and we did sort of have a thesis project at the end. And when I was in school, my team, we used this RPG Maker version that was Japanese translated into Russian and then translated poorly into English. And it still worked on PCs we had in the just American PCs or whatever. And so we did a little short concept based on the Japanese movie Battle Royale, which you couldn't even get legally in the U.S. So it's a game made on bootleg game development software based off a bootleg movie. In retrospect, I'm not sure how good of an idea that was, but it was a fun way to play around with it, to say the least.
In case anyone hasn't heard of that one, I was looking over to the side when you were talking about Unreal Tournament, because I was looking for my huge ass Unreal Tournament or Unreal Development Kit books from that exact time period. They were huge, and they were like $50 each, and there were 2 volumes. And that was around the time I was getting into it seriously too. I made my very first game with one of the very early versions of Game Maker. I was only 17 or 18. Then I moved on to try to get into the UDK and sort of bounced around from there. But I ended up having to go into professional software development, not games. So I didn't get to focus on it for quite some time. And I sort of picked it back up later.
Well, in my day job, I work in software development. I do QA, and I've also done tech support.
God bless you.
For medical and financial applications.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's different, but somewhat related. And then I'm working on computer software of some sort. But I go back, and I haven't thought about this in a while, but thinking back to my college days, what was the most useful thing is you made your little game in your class or your demo, and then the professor you would load it up on the computer at the front of the classroom, and then a random student would have to play it. And you have to sit there, and you couldn't tell them what to do.
Oh, no.
And that was very informative, because you assume so much, especially when you're designing your own game, how things work. And what you think might be intuitive isn't to someone else. And it goes to show how, why there's tutorials in games.
Exactly. And it's only all the more frustrating for children, I'm here to tell you. But I think it's worth mentioning, you were using RPG Maker at that time, and it was basically a hacked version, but it kind of had to be at that time, because that was like the only way to use it at that time in a language you could read, or something like that. Do I remember that right? Yeah,
more or less, because actually, a few years before that, I had placed the original PlayStation 1, and I had RPG Maker on the PlayStation 1. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that was quite terrible to use with the PlayStation controller and not having a keyboard or a mouse or anything. Yeah. So on the computer, it was so much easier. But you're right. Yeah, there wasn't as many game development things out there. I think, you had the Warcraft 2 had a level editor. StarCraft had a level editor. Of course, Doom and Wolfenstein, I did a little, I didn't release anything, but I had a book on how to use I wish I could remember which one, but it was like how to do maps with Doom, and you're using a DOS-based WAD editor.
Oh, yeah.
And that was extraordinarily complicated. And I was really blown away reading recently how John Romero just came out with a new episode of levels for the original Doom.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's nuts. But at the same time, like, what better guy to do it?
Exactly right. It's wild to see some of these living legends still out here doing stuff like that. It's cool that they're doing new stuff too, but going back to the old stuff is just, if you'd asked me as a kid, like, what would you like to see when you grow up? Like, I want to see these people still doing this stuff later on. So from here, how do you get into, at what point do you start getting into the writing and the journalism stuff?
Yeah, so as a kid, I subscribed to Nintendo Power magazine, and I would read each issue, like 20 times at least, and memorize them and all that stuff, because you didn't really have the internet, or if you did, what was available was really poor. You had nuke.com, or I think Happy Puppy, or something is really pretty simple, basic websites. And the writing really started with I was doing, at that time, a film program in college, and one of my friends, Zach, was doing a journalism program, and we started a website called eBoredom. And we just started doing reviews of old video games. And in college, I reached out to, I actually probably want to republish these in some sort of a book form, but I reached out to game designers and producers and composers and interviewed them for this stupid little site. And so I got to talk to people like Bradley-Tschirgi, who designed Out of This World, which was sort of an older Prince of Persia style game. And, oh, geez, like Brian Fargo, one of the co-founders of Interplay. Like, for some reason, these people would talk to me, and I don't know why. But
that's really cool, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I don't think I quite appreciated what I had, and just having the gumption to go out and reach out to these people and do it was a lot of fun. And then I kind of had, blogs on and off for a while, but it really wasn't until a friend of mine who was an editor for PC Gamer, in like sometime within the past 10 years, I guess. I can't quite remember when. Said, Matt, you shouldn't be writing these articles for these websites for free. They should be paying you. And I was like, well, can you give me a contact? And, he gave me a contact at PC Gamer UK, and I sold them something, and it didn't end up being published, but the check still cleared. In fact, the check cleared. It took so long for the check to clear, and by the time it cleared, Brexit had just been announced. So the value of the pound had soared down. So it cost me around $100 in income, but that was, my first sale, really. And from then I was pitching stuff to people like Games Radar, and even did some technology stuff for Pro Focus Technology, and sort of built up a roster of articles and Hardcore Gaming 101, and kind of got that discipline to get stuff done. And I did start off writing unpaid, and I don't know, without that experience, I wouldn't have gotten good enough to do the paid articles. But at the same time, I don't know if I'd recommend that to other people either, because I think you should get paid for your work, even if it's just $20 or whatever some of these smaller sites pay. At least that's something.
Yeah, I did a little bit of this, and I went in such a stupid order because I was on Twitter and sort of making friends in the game development space just because I was going indie for the first time. And it was that way that I saw the first sort of call for freelancers for Zam.com, and met one of the editors there. And they took some of my work, and it was like, oh my God, this is a whole new thing, whole new career that I always thought would be awesome. But like, I was a technical guy with a tech school degree. And so, but people were letting me write, and they were saying it's okay, and they like what I do. So I thought, this is awesome. I would love to get on like as a staff writer somewhere and see if I can do that, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I read a couple of Nathan Munier's books on game journalism, and okay, I'll be like that guy. So I took a free staff position at a website that would give you games for reviews, basically.
Right.
And I thought, I'm getting free games. My inner child is happy, and I'm going to do this and whatever. And within a couple of months, I was helping them edit, and it consumed my life. Like, it took over everything, as these things do, and I wasn't making a dime. And that made it harder to sell work to paid sites because they're like, well, what do you spend all your time on with this other site? Like, oh, I did it all wrong. But I've come to that same way of looking at it that you do and that your contact at PC Gamer did. I don't think starting for free is a good way to do it unless you're just doing it for your own website or investing it in yourself. A site that'll take your work for free is never going to not do that, you know? So
right, and some of these places, I'm not going to name names, but if you look around, you can connect the dots.
Yeah.
Some of these are sites that make more than 6 figures on Patreon. Some of these are some of the top movie sites out there that when I said my rate was whatever it was, which was, I don't know, I think at the time it might have been like $50 or something. I was lowballing a bit. Mm-hmm. They said like, oh, that's too rich for us. And I'm like, really? You said you're the number 2, movie website in this particular genre? Like it's, a lot of it's still going on to this day, and it's sad. And I think you have to hold yourself to a better standard. And because as long as writers keep accepting writing for these things for the exposure, they'll keep on taking advantage of them.
Yeah. Does your writing around the web sort of follow any sort of theme, or do you just bounce around and whatever, tickles your fancy?
I definitely have a theme of either movies or retro games. And I think my love of retro games started sort of accidentally. We had visited, as a kid, I lived overseas for 6 years, but we would come to the States to visit people, family. And, we had a family member that had a NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System. And that sort of blew me away. And I wanted one of those. And my dad didn't get me one of those initially, but he got me an Atari 2600 with like 20 games for like next to nothing.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was kind of annoyed because none of my friends that came over to my house wanted to play this old shitty system.
Right.
But at the same, by playing those, I sort of, you learn to have your fun with them and learn to have a respect, I think, for the history of the medium. And really, you go back, and I think they recently released an art book of the covers for the Atari 2600 games, and they're quite wonderful paintings on a lot of them. Like these games look like squares and rectangles, and you have to do this like lush cover art, and it was that same way with the 8-bit and 16-bit era. You would go to the Blockbuster Video and you'd pick a game to rent just based on the cover alone.
Yeah. I met a guy who's programming a modern Atari game in his spare time, and he did a little talk at a festival recently, and he goes, well, if you look at the picture on the cartridge, this picture has like 1,000 times the data space of the actual game itself. So like you can fit the game into just this image if you were to scan it thousands of times. And it's funny how that has gone. I started with the Atari as well, and I think it's a good experience. I wish I had started my son on it just so I could sort of walk him through the evolution of games so I never hear him say, like, I'm bored.
Right. I did an article a few years ago for Dread Central looking at, like horror-themed Atari 2600 games. And so firing those up in the emulator, it was really kind of a blast to the past, and it really forces you to use your imagination when the gameplay is simplistic and repetitive. And I say that, and I like things, like Tetris and Pac-Man, and, some games that are pretty simple by today's standards. But that on the Atari 2600, they even tried a game of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is complete nonsense. That shouldn't have happened.
It's true.
And it did. And there was a Halloween, game on that system. Mm-hmm. It's just completely bananas. Yeah, and I guess to answer the other part of the question, the writing is on movies. And as a kid, as I mentioned, I lived overseas for 6 years because of my dad's job. I was in Central and South America. And the only English channel we got was CNN. So we would watch a lot of movies you could rent from the embassy. And my dad didn't like to waste time with children's cartoons. So often, me and my sister, who were just like in first or second grade, would watch things like Silence of the Lambs or Terminator, or the one that really sticks in my mind is Eddie Murphy's Coming to America.
Oh yeah,
where I saw that in a theater at the embassy, and you have lines of, you watch it now as an adult, lines of dialogue where the women are with Eddie Murphy in the bath, and he says the royal penis has been cleaned. Like, you don't know what that means as a first grader, but it's like it or not, I think that helped form my love for movies because it's something we did as a family, and and enjoy it together, even if you didn't always understand what was going on.
Yeah, that would be really special, I would think, if that was sort of your big connection to life as you know it to some degree.
Right, and along those, another thing along those lines, so kids watch cartoons, but we lived overseas and we couldn't really. So our grandparents would videotape cartoons once a month and mail it to us, and so we'd be excited for a videotape to come on with new commercials. And think about going to that when you move back to the United States after 6 years, and there's new commercials and new shows on all the time was a bit overwhelming.
Enjoy basketball, soccer, and all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using bonus code CAPITAL and your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Plus, when you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, player props, and daily boosted odds specials. Download the BetMGM app today or go to BetMGM.com and enter bonus code CAPITAL and place your first wager risk-free up to $1,000. Now you're winning with the king of sportsbooks. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. Washington, D.C. only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. Enjoy basketball, soccer, and all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using bonus code CAPITAL and your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Plus, when you register with BetMGM, you'll get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, player props, and daily boosted odds specials. Download the BetMGM app today or go to BetMGM.com and enter bonus code CAPITAL and place your first wager risk-free up to $1,000. Now you're winning with the king of sportsbooks. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. Washington, D.C. only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700.
It's true. Things progressed in that department pretty rapidly. So this does kind of make a lot of sense that you would later have the sort of passion required to do a long-running film podcast. I mean, a lot of people might not have what it takes. However, it does sound like a blast to have a buddy that you just have to watch these films with and do shows. I mean, that would be a fun... do you guys hang out and watch them before you do shows?
So here's the thing. So I live in Portland, Oregon. My co-host Thrasher lives in Frankfort, Kentucky. Oh. And so we have to line things up. I think recently we've used things like Plex or Netflix or whatever to sync up with what we're watching a bit better. Yeah. So although I would love to do it with us in the same room, I haven't seen him in person since my wedding 9 years ago. But that we can connect through Skype. It's the way I describe the show is like I edit it pretty loosely on purpose. It's almost like you're eavesdropping on a conversation we might have on the phone talking about these movies. And why I picked the sequel angle is even as a kid, I was always fascinated with you go to the video rental store and see the boxes again. And you see, Halloween 3 and Halloween 5, like, oh, maybe this next one will be better. And every once in a while, you get those sequels after several entries that kind of blows you away. But for the most part, the sequels do get worse, and it's a weird little journey you're constantly going on. It's like the first movie, it's the top of the slide, and then you keep going down in quality. But hope you're looking for that bump that'll bump you up in the air and be a bit of a fine thing to surprise you with.
Yeah, I think I probably watched more films as a kid than I even do now. And that was partially because my grandparents weren't entirely paying attention to what I was doing at their house, but also because they would take me to yard sales, which they liked to go to, which was fine, and we would look for movies that people had on tape. That's what everyone was doing all across the nation, children. They would tape movies on TV, and they would have collections of them, and then they would sell them to you.
Yes,
we would all be sued to death these days. But, so I noticed that on your website somewhere you've used Police Academy as sort of a joke for a series that is just, zany to watch. And that was a big one from my childhood. For some reason, we always had Police Academy movies around. And I was always watching them. So I do love a series you can get into and you sort of recognize the name and go, oh my God, they made another one. Let's see it.
Right. And it's especially weird, this latest trend of you have a movie that's a sequel to only the first movie in the series, and it pretends like all the other sequels didn't exist. Kind of like you had with the recent Halloween movie with Jamie Lee Curtis where she's older. Right. And you're going to get that same thing with the new Terminator movie, Terminator Dark Fate, comes out later this year, that only acts like 1 and 2 exist. So it can get quite confusing.
Yeah, for sure. And so you're doing this podcast, and is this the way that you first decided to track down Uwe Boll?
Good question. No. So I was on the internet pretty young. My family was in Atlanta, Georgia, and we had an ISP at the time called Mindspring. I think now they're called Earthlink. I don't know if they're still around.
I know about them, yeah.
Is it? Okay. So, but at the time, it was all dial-up, and I had a 2400 baud modem or whatever, and my Packard Bell 4666 with 8 gigs of RAM, or not gigs, megabytes.
Megabytes.
Double speed CD-ROM, all that fun stuff. So we would, I'd go and use the internet and all that stuff, and Uwe Boll I had heard of with his first major film in the United States to get a theatrical release was House of the Dead. And that came out around the same time as the American remake of The Ring. And I was going with my college friends to see The Ring, but part of me wanted to see House of the Dead because the reviews were like, "Oh, this movie is so bad you can't imagine it." And I've always been a fan of like something is so bad it's good. Or I was talking on Twitter a few years ago to Duncan Jones, who directed Warcraft, and we were talking about, and he tweeted back at me like, "Matt, do you like movies ironically?" And I think that's a really tough question to answer, but he sort of had a point. But I do sort of like the trauma sort of aesthetic and the sort of that kind of the more indie, grittier sort of thing. So, and to answer your question, when I first saw Uwe Boll, it was a few years later. House of the Dead came out on video. I had a friend over. I made some Japanese-inspired pork stew, and we had some beers and just laughed our ass off at how ridiculous some of the dialogue was, and it was still compelling in spite of itself, which I think is more than you can say for some video game movies like, Double Dragon or Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or I can name a lot of worse video game movies than Uwe Boll. And it sort of grew into an obsession picking up his used movies at the store when I could find them, because they're really not that much in print. Even now, they're kind of tricky to find unless you look in the used section. Yeah. So, I think that's how it all began. And although the only one of his I saw in the theater was, besides Blood Rain, I think was In the Name of the King, A Dungeon Siege Tale.
Which I've only heard of to this day. Yeah.
It was his highest budget. It stars Jason Statham, Burt Reynolds. Ray Liotta plays an evil wizard. That's an odd choice. Yeah. It also has John Rhys Davies, which is weird because he just was in Lord of the Rings as Gimli not that long before then. But I really like it, but it's a very, very quirky fantasy epic that is certainly much better than, say, the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think what I learned watching these Uwe Boll movies and working on these unofficial books I'm working on about Uwe Boll movies is you have to compare them to other Uwe Boll movies. If you compare an Uwe Boll movie to, say, Roman Polanski or Quentin Tarantino, like, you're going to quickly get nowhere. And once you see enough of them, you sort of notice patterns and things you can enjoy within it. But it is easy at first glance to look at these things and go, oh, they're stupid. But if you dig, I think there's a lot more there beyond the surface if you're willing to look.
Yeah, for sure. The first of his films that I saw was Blood Rain. Mm-hmm. And then I think the only other one I've seen is Postal. Yeah. And somehow I managed to see them both through Netflix, but I think it was back in the disc mailing days. Mm-hmm. So if I remember right. And I remember sitting back and at this point, it really wasn't that long ago. So by that time, I've spent all of my life hearing how ridiculous these films are. And really, by the time I sat down, it was like, well, they're different. They're clearly different.
Yes.
But it's not the shit stew that I was promised. Like there is a certain mindset to it. Like, it's not just pure insanity, anything like that. So I had to, and I think I've even tweeted back to you to this effect when I saw you mentioning him on Twitter. I thought, it's not at all the way people describe it. Like, there is a certain system to it, and it's created with certain guidelines in mind. Yet, like you said, you have to compare it to itself, basically, and to the other films made alongside it. But he's a prolific film creator, so he keeps getting to do it, and it's its own thing. This becomes a big thing for you, the film work of Uwe Boll.
Mm-hmm.
Time passes. How do you guys? I'm trying to frame this question correctly. Like, how does this become an ongoing thing where you guys are kind of like in contact?
Right. So I had mentioned I do the podcast Sequelcast 2 and Friends, and living here in Portland, Oregon, we have a few different movie and video game conventions that are in town. And so on some level, to get me and my friends into these things for free, we do a live panel at this with the Sequelcast branding, right? Yeah. And we decided to do it in 2018 at the Portland Retro Game Expo, which if you've never been, I'd recommend it. It's one of the best retro game expos in the country. We did a panel on Uwe Boll's video game films, and I was in contact with one of Uwe Boll's producers, Gary Otto, and I got to interview him for the panel. And the original plan was to have him appear through Skype live at the panel and take questions from the audience. But unfortunately, at the convention center, the internet is so poor that I had to do it in advance and sort of cut a video and put it up. And you can see it on YouTube at youtube.com/sequelcast to see the whole thing. But so I think that's really how it started. But even that, getting Uwe Boll to through Gary Otto to agree to it took a few months. And it's this. You've interviewed people for your articles or for your podcast, and it's never a quick thing to get the stars to align. Yeah, it's a lot of back and forth and give and take, and you eventually settle on something.
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a couple on the line right now that are like big name in the industry at least, and it's like, well, hit me up in a couple of months, and I've got deadlines, and they absolutely do. These people are very busy, and I'm stunned that they would give me the time of day in the first place. And so I'm happy to do it, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, I will have to clear out some time for communication leading up to this, and it's going to be kind of a big thing. So I get it.
Right. And so the interview, I think, went well. I did a lot of research listening to him being interviewed on other podcasts and other websites for sort of background. I mean, I'm trying to, the first time I did sort of a celebrity interview, if you want to call it that, was at one of the colleges I went to before SCAD was at Georgia State University. I got to interview as part of the big one, I think, was in person. I got to interview Paul Hogan, the guy that played Crocodile Dundee, because Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles came out, the third one that no one remembers existed. And so I got to talk to Paul Hogan. I got to talk to the executive producer Lance Houle, who used to work on some Chuck Norris films in the 80s, like Missing in Action. Yeah. And that was sort of a blast to do that. But so I don't get nervous, doing these sort of interviews, but it is always awkward in that you have a limited amount of time to talk to these people. As you said, their time is valuable, and you need to do your research. At the same time, you can't militantly go through your questions because you want it to have kind of a conversational feel, right? So it's a real fine balance, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think with Uwe Boll, it was fortunate enough to work. And then around that same time, I think ever since 2007, I had the idea of doing a book about Uwe Boll's movies. And it was really I think around 2015, 2016, he did his third Rampage movie. It has no relations to the video games. Happens to be called Rampage. Right. Called the most recent one, I think it's Rampage Capital Punishment. I have to look it up. I could have that title wrong. And he said, this is the last movie I'm going to do. This is it. I can't do it. The budgets aren't high enough. And I thought, well, maybe this is a sign. I should really write a book about this stuff. And I pitched Moon Books Publishing as a small press on it, and they liked the idea. And originally the idea was just for me to do a book on the video game movies, but then I decided to sort of do 3 separate volumes, each one looking at about 10 films apiece. And that way, people kind of cherry pick what they wanted. Everything is split up into series nowadays. So I hope for all 3 volumes to be done and out there by sometime, in 2020, maybe early 2021. But this first one should come out in a few months here.
Yeah, you've clearly been very busy with that. I was surprised that in the middle of everything else, you're managing to complete and publish a book. Hey, that's great for them to go, yeah, let's do 3 volumes. That's you don't hear about that too often.
No, I mean, I pitched them on that idea and they agreed to. I was surprised they agreed to it, really. And it's I just really thought, and I looked on Amazon and there's no English language books, and I have to stress this is an unofficial book, about Uwe Boll. There isn't. And I said, well, if someone's going to do it, it might as well be me, and I should just cover everything. Because why not? If I'm just going to cover just the video game movies, that's ignoring, most of his stuff is not video game movies. Most of it is often based on historical topics one way or another, or more political. He did one called Heart of America that was inspired by Columbine. He did Tunnel Rats, which was a Vietnam movie. He kind of goes all over the place with the genres. So I just figured you might as well just do everything and just have it as 3 smaller volumes. Unfortunately, Moon Books Publishing agreed. So
yeah, and it's funny that he hasn't been written about more, even in just general film books and things like that, because he certainly is a part of film history, whether it be for fame or notoriety. He's done something no one else has really done. I don't know how you don't capture that and tell that story.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think when he announced his so-called retirement, and I think he might be doing other stuff in the future, we'll have to see. He got some attention that way. There was like a Vanity Fair article that was pretty good written about him, and Hollywood Reporter and Variety did these big sort of retrospectives on him. And I think now, enough time has passed where people might want to give things a second look. And I think, speaking of Uwe Boll, to kind of steer it more to the video game design conversation, I've been working with Gary Otto and Uwe Boll on a video game based on an unproduced screenplay.
This part freaking blows my mind. Like, I had to look at your notes several times. I'm like, is he saying what I think he's saying? So, man, and that sort of came on the heels of doing the interview. Was there a connection there? Through the interview, I had introduced myself to his producer, Gary Otto, and we hit it off. And it just kind of came out of the blue late 2018. And I said, well, I've been itching to make a game again. And to do it this way, I thought would be really novel. And so it's based off a unproduced screenplay by Uwe Boll, Gary Otto, and Ben Woodowis. And it's more, I think originally it was developed to be a Postal sequel, but then it was turned into something else. But I would say it's more along those lines and more comedic. Mm-hmm. And you don't see comedy a lot in games even now. You might see a little bit in sort of the old like LucasArts Monkey Island games, or even what was it? You had that game with Jack Black on the Xbox 360, the Brutal Legend. Brutal Legend, sure, yeah.
It had some comedy elements, but still, comedy is really underused in games, and I'm not really sure why that is.
It's hard to say. I'm with you, and I agree. It's not used as well as it should be. I love the idea of doing comedic games and more story-driven games, and sometimes I think it's maybe because smaller groups want to tackle those projects, and they're largely technical people who don't feel as comfortable working in the comedy space or whatever it is. I've speculated on that before, but I'm really not sure.
Yeah, you're starting to see some comedy like in the dating sims.
Oh, yeah.
There was one a few years back called Hatful Pigeon, which was a dating sim where everyone is pigeons. That's very strange. I think the webpage for that said the game operates at 60 flaps per second. There's a whole lot of pigeon puns, and yet like the plot is this weird post-apocalyptic Mad Max thing. Like it somehow manages to work in spite of itself.
Yeah.
So you see comedy every now and then. So to work in that space within a game, and yet it also has other elements to it, I think will make it interesting when it comes out.
So obviously this will be more of a story-driven thing. I mean, is Uwe going to be somewhat participatory in this? I mean, are things going to go back to him and he goes thumbs up, thumbs down? Or is he mostly providing sort of a content base to go on?
I would say mostly a content base. Most of it is me working with Gary, the producer. But that being said, I've watched at this point nearly every Uwe Boll film, so I know the tone of the different stuff it goes for, and I think that certainly helps, because there's definitely a challenge where you have a screenplay, right? Originally it was meant for film, and you're adapting that to a video game, and I do draw upon for whatever reason. I think as we mentioned, I love video games and movies as a child, and I still do, obviously, because of the podcast and all the writing and stuff. I would play a lot of video games based on movies, which you don't really get that much anymore. Yeah. And a lot of them were not very good, right? So I think you kind of see like what works and what doesn't. And did you ever play any of those?
The NES was such a golden age for those movie-based films, and some of them seemed very closely related to their content, and some of them did not. So even as a kid, I enjoyed tracking those down, renting them, because renting was all the rage in that time, and it was pretty low risk. Now you'd be pissed because you'd spend 60, 70, 80 bucks on it.
I think the closest you see now to movie games are the Lego games.
Yeah, and the Lego games are pretty fun. So maybe that's how our version of perfecting that, and that's as good as we're going to get, perhaps.
Yeah, I was sort of blown away the other day. I was watching, my nephew Tobin was playing Lego Avengers, one of the recent Marvel ones. Mm-hmm. And he had a character on a jetpack, and he just had him going around in circles again and again and again. He wasn't, trying to open the door or whatever you were trying to do. And his grandpa was asking him, Tobin, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm having a parade. And I'm like, that's a perfectly valid thing to do. Like, it's maybe not what the game intended, but that the Lego movie games do kind of a playground for that sort of a thing, I think is amusing. And the controls, I think, are simple enough too, that it helps. My wife and I, they're really good for couch co-op, and my wife and I really like the Lego Harry Potter games.
Oh yeah. I think my wife would like that too, actually.
And they re-released a version of those on the Xbox One and PS4 not too long ago. And they do a good job doing the magic spells and doing the plot of the movies. And the older Lego games have it in the cutscenes where they don't just use dialogue from the movies. Instead, it's sort of like pantomime, silent movie humor. And I think that's a bit more charming.
Yeah, I definitely liked that, where they would have their own jokes and their little inside things for the movies. But you bring up a good point. Also for the kids, it's this just play set like a real set of Legos would be. And you can kind of do more than you would do with the average game. You can sort of have that leeway to play around, and nothing's going to come murder you, and it's just fun.
Right. And, with the Uwe Boll game I'm working on, I'm having fun, kind of working through some of the logic of when a screenplay is written, and when you're reading it, it's written to be filmed. And so a film set, that's in 3 dimensions. You can do camera angles and stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you're making a game to look a certain way, you don't have all that freedom. So how do you adapt, limited movement as opposed to a screenplay where you can say, oh, I don't know, like the guy jumps behind the box and pulls out a gun, and we follow the bullet going into the guy's head. But, it's a really interesting, both intellectual challenge, and I also think it's fun at the same time. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'll be curious to see what people think when it comes out down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Are you collaborating with others, or is that mostly you and the producer going back and forth?
As of now, it's mostly me and the producer going back and forth. But I think things could change too. I mean, we're still fairly early on in the process. So we'll just have to see what happens. We're sort of building in some flexibility there.
Nice. Well, it's encouraging to see that there's more story content coming from that direction, and I know people will be. Who wouldn't be curious about this? Is my
Sure,
question.
yeah.
Like, this should not have trouble finding an audience, I don't think.
No, I agree. I think it is really going to be something quite unique at the end of the day.
Yeah, little bit of a historical thing to be a part of. I was looking for Uwe. I think his Twitter is not exactly active at this moment. Don't entirely know what happened there, but it's still articles come out about him all the time. So
Yes, and lately he's been writing reviews on Letterboxd
oh
that are very Uwe. I don't know how else to say it. He's very much him, the kind of bizarre, but it's kind of going all over the place in terms of movies he's looking at. So I think he's having fun with that. And if you want to look for a really interesting sort of bit of Uwe Boll trivia, the late Anthony Bourdain did an episode of his show, not the last one he did, but one of the ones he did, I think, on the Travel Channel, maybe.
oh okay.
He went to Vancouver and got to be an extra in the Uwe Boll video game movie Far Cry. And there's like a 10-minute segment on his show where it shows Anthony Bourdain working with Uwe Boll on this like 1-second scene where he plays a guy that gets shot. And in the movie, like, the guy has no dialogue. And if you know it's Anthony Bourdain, you know it's him. But otherwise, it could just be a random extra as far as you know. And it's a delightfully strange segment on a travel show.
Man, Anthony was a good sport, that's for sure.
Yes, all the crazy things he had to do. And, I mean, really, the writing, too. He did a few fiction mystery books, one of which was adapted into a movie produced by Ron Perlman.
Oh,
And he did some comic books and stuff too. Like, he really did. Anthony Bourdain is sorely missed. I really was a fan of his stuff.
yeah. I only got to know him a little bit, know his work a little bit, right before he passed, which was just a shame. Yeah. So, well, tell me this as we sort of wind down. Obviously, you've got this project coming up. Following that, say it goes well, I mean, are you going to do more game work? I mean, what's in the future for you?
Yeah, I'd like to do more game work and more writing work. I wouldn't mind fooling around doing a sort of graphic adventure type of game.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that genre growing up, and I recently on Good Old Games, GOG.com, I picked up a bundle of these games from Wadjet Eye Games, and was playing one called The Shiva recently, where you play as a rabbi in a murder detective story. Like, it's a very odd premise, but it really works, and it really sort of, given that I'm interested in the narrative side of video games, it makes me think that could be something fun as a genre to play around with next.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll be busy with the other books as well, of course.
Yeah, definitely. It really was quite something to get all the movies for research, and you look on your shelf, and it's 30 Uwe Boll movies staring you in the face. And you got to be, okay, let's do this.
Right. You may have the biggest Uwe shelf at this point.
I think so. And in fact, for some of the stuff you mentioned, Postal has a director's cut that you can only see on the German DVD. So for like, I don't know, $30 or something, I got a Region 2 LG brand DVD player off Amazon and ordered the Region 2 DVD off of eBay and crossed my fingers hoping it would work. And it did. So I did that just for this project. So I got a few of his stuff that's only come out in Europe. But
Man.
most of Uwe Boll's work is in the United States.
That's why I tell people you have to really like your content when you get into projects like this, because you're going to do things for it you never see coming. You're buying weird DVD players, or you're collecting all these films, and if it's just something you just sort of liked a little bit in the first place, you're going to crash and burn.
Absolutely. And just so much of it, this is really the first long form project I've done like this as far as writing with this first book that's coming out, is it really is a discipline. You have to, I mean, I love writing, but I work a day job, as do most writers, and you have to make a choice when you come home from work. Am I going to sit down? Am I going to write my book? Am I going to play a video game? Am I going to take a nap? Am I, whatever. Right. It just really comes down to that. And I think the more you do it, the more you get better at it. And one thing that was a real challenge to me is I had written, like little short fiction pieces that I've never released anywhere. Maybe I'll do some of that later in the future. But when I write fiction, I can put on music and do whatever I want. But because I'm doing a nonfiction book based on movies, I'm referencing things constantly. So I can't, listening to music is far too distracting.
I'm that way too. I can't have Spotify playing if I'm working on, I found last night I couldn't even configure software while like Hulu was playing, or I had something going on Spotify.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like working with config files and trying to figure out what .NET stuff I need. And I'm like, I can't, it's got to shut down. It's funny.
What were you messing with config files for?
I'm actually trying to get Monogame up and going, and I finally did at the end of last night, but I wanted to have some cross-platform potential without having to rely on something like Unity or Unreal. So finally got there, and now I can finally start looking at maybe what the next big project will be.
Well, great. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation we've had, and I hope you and your listeners have taken away something from it as well.
They absolutely will, and I'm encouraging them to follow you along online. Where can they catch you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, people can follow me at MATWBT. The website is matwbt.com. You can listen to the podcast, sequelcast2.com. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The book that's coming out is The Films of Uwe Boll, Volume 1, The Video Game Movies, 2003 to 2014, coming out from Moon Books Publishing. It should come out certainly before the end of the year.
Very cool. And let's get you back before the game is ready to play, and we can send you your first players.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, thank you once again to Matt. Great guest, really nice guy to have around on Twitter. Again, his book is coming out September 27th, 2019 from Moon Books. That's The Films of Uwe Boll, Volume 1, The Video Game Movies. So if you are interested in that, check it out. Also, if you like Game Dev Breakdown, we would love to have you subscribe. You can do that at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify. We're everywhere. You can check out show notes at CodeWritePlay.com. You can check out our Patreon community at patreon.com/CodeWritePlay. Let us know how you're enjoying the show. Reach out to us on social media, and look forward to bringing you more fun stuff later in the week. So keep playing, keep working hard. Catch you soon.